mchana gani? Kuna cha mchana. Watu wa mchana maneno yao tulishaongea tu kimapema wa mchana. Maingia naekewa mchana na kuna graphics card. Naekewa mchana gani sasa? Tusiwekea maiki mchana. Kuna cha mchana zi. Mchana hapa vijana wanakimbia tu. Wanakimbia wakiwa mchana.
You know, places that people would really want to live and really value. And that isn't what comes out at the other end because of the dominance of one question, really, which is how do we maximise the profit from this scheme? And what you need to do about that is we need to change who owns the land long term. You know, if you need long term land ownership, long term master planning. But at the moment, the decisions all go through this prism of we've got a volume house builder. They want to turn out volume because they've got a statement to make to the stock exchange at the end of the next quarter. And that's the driving factor of what gets built. And, you know, that you're right. I mean, take the train around the country and travel around the country and you see these absolutely generic housing developments coming out. And the quality problems with new build that we've had over the last 2 decades is extraordinary. I mean, like, there's the high-rise stuff and the cladding that we talked about earlier, but the... you know, the extent of problems that people have had in regular houses, it shouldn't be that way. There's too much competence in the industry and there's too much money in the industry for them to make mistakes like that. And yeah, I mean, it needs a good deal of reform.
Thank you very much indeed for your comment. This is from Steve, who says the Conservative Party will not build social housing because they complained it creates Labour voters. I think that's absolutely true initially, but I think if they had done it under the coalition, or indeed later on under Theresa May and Boris Johnson, I think they could have made a big political thing of it and saying, look, we are going to build these houses, and I don't think that it would necessarily have created Labour voters, but we shall never know, will we? Peter, thank you very much indeed. It's been a great hour. Our listeners have really enjoyed it. There's loads and loads of complimentary texts coming in here. Not every guest gets that, you know, so I feel very privileged. And Peter's book, let me tell you once again, is called Homesick, How Housing Broke London and How to Fix It, published by One World in the paperback. What's the price? It's
in hardback at the moment. It's retails at 20 quid, but you can find it at Amazon and other places for cheap.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Now, coming up in the next hour, we are going to talk about conscription. You might think it's a bit of an odd thing to do in some ways, but we're doing it because France is going to reintroduce laws on, well, a former military service 25 years after conscription was phased out under President Chirac. this. I don't think any British government would introduce something that would make it absolutely mandatory. I suspect there would be voluntary options alongside it, but given the threats that we face in the world, do you think this is a good idea? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, the government's U-turned on its manifesto promise to provide day one protection against unfair dismissal. Workers will now need 6 months of service, down from the current 2 years, to start a claim. The Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy's told LBC it is the right thing to do.
What we promised to do, which is to get trade unions and business leaders in a room to reach a compromise. They have reached a compromise on 6 months. What that will do is take rights to unfair dismissal, the wait for that, from 2 years to 6 months. You'll no longer have to wait for 2 years. When this legislation is passed, you'll be entitled to them after 6 months. I think that's a reasonable and a fair compromise.
Well, Unite the Union says the employment rights bill is now a shell of its former self, even with immediate rights to sick pay and paternity leave still included. The Prime Minister has insisted Labour has kept to its manifesto promise not to raise taxes on working people. So Keir Starmer's told LBC fairness was at the heart of the budget statement. Former Labour Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell told LBC one announcement yesterday made him very happy.
I'm so pleased that we've persuaded the Chancellor to scrap the 2-child limit. That one achievement, I just treasure it, really. I think predictions are at least 500,000 children will be lifted out of poverty.
Elsewhere this evening, Vladimir Putin says he's ready for serious talks about peace in Ukraine. The Russian leader claims the current plans set out by the US President Donald Trump are only a basis for a future agreement, not a final version. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says the alliance's support for Ukraine remains unwavering.
Russia has paid a high price for marginal gains, and Ukraine continues to defend itself with courage. There's tremendous renewed energy around the peace process, and for that I want to commend US President Trump.
The seventh person's been arrested over last month's attack at a synagogue in Manchester. The 31-year-old is being questioned on suspicion of preparing acts of terrorism after he was detained at Manchester Airport. And Aston Villa have continued their good form in the Europa League with a 2-1 victory at home to Young Boys. Celtic came from behind to win 3-1 at Feyenoord. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 2 points at 96.94. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.14. LBC weather: cloud and rain will clear the southeast tonight, leaving many places dry but breezy with clear spells. Heavy showers will then spread across the northern and western areas overnight. Lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Darren Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 9:03 on LBC. We're going to indulge in something of a rarity in this hour because the subject we're going to talk about is one that I don't hold a particularly strong view on, so I'm not going to tell you what I'm not going to tell you what I think about it. It's because I'm actually willing to be persuaded on either side of the argument, which is very unusual for me. I usually have quite a definite view on something. I'm not beyond changing my mind, but on this one, I'd quite like to hear from you with arguments that should persuade me one way or the other. We're going to talk about whether Britain should follow France in bringing in a form of military service. Now, the history of conscription in this country is relatively clear. We haven't had it apart from when we were at war. So in the First World War it operated between 1916 and 1920, and from 1939 to 1960. So the last serviceman was discharged in May 1963, and national service continued after the Second World War with a requirement for eligible men to serve for up to 2 years in the UK and around the world. Now, since the 1960s, successive governments have ruled out reintroducing national service for the armed forces, arguing that a highly trained professional armed force staffed by volunteers is the best way to provide for the defence of the United Kingdom. Now, if you look back in history, going back to, the 18th century, we've never really had to use conscription, apart from in the two world wars, because we've always been able to man our armed forces, and up until recently it was manning our armed forces by volunteers. So why would you want to introduce conscription if you can do that? Now, at the moment, we have an army that is at its smallest level I think since the Napoleonic Wars. Now, you can argue, well, why do we need a big army? Because modern warfare is not fought by traditional methods. Well, up to a point, Lord Copper, because I think the Ukraine war has shown that traditional arm-to-arm combat is still part of it. Yes, technology has changed things, but we do need still people to serve in our armed forces, and they've been depleted, I think, in a completely disgraceful manner. Certainly, I would say, over the last 30 years, if not before that. So, this is what France is doing. They're introducing a limited form of military service in response to growing fears of a confrontation with Russia. Now, France abolished its conscription in 1996 when Jacques Chirac was president. And this plan will see men and women military training. This sounds very similar to what Rishi Sunak proposed in the last general election, but obviously he got, it was something that was almost bounced. I think it was bounced on his colleagues as well, and it never really took off. President Macron has been speaking about this. He announced the plan at an infantry base near Grenoble in southeast France. He said, we need to mobilising the nation to defend itself, to be ready and remain respected. Now, the new national service will be brought in gradually from next summer, mainly for 18 to 19-year-olds who will receive at least €800 a month. In this uncertain world, he says, where might triumphs over right, war is in the present tense. He continued, the armed forces will benefit from motivated young French men and women. It is an act of trust in our youth. Now, initially, numbers will be restricted to 3,000 next year, but that will rise to 50,000 by 2035. Now, France currently has around 200,000 military personnel and a further 47,000 reservists. And this new scheme should usher in a three-tier structure comprising professionals, reservists and volunteers. So here's a question. Should we emulate France? If you are 18 or 19 years old, or if you're approaching that age, I'd be very keen to hear from you, to hear what you think about this. There are many countries that have national service anyway still. Israel clearly is one of those. But many European countries did abolish national service in the 1990s or 2000s. Germany, my best friend in Germany, he had to serve 2 years in the Bundeswehr. That was in the late 1980s. And I think he found it incredibly useful. It taught him a lot. He said it basically made him grow up. He said it has made me the man I am today. And I think older generations who served through conscription back in the 1940s and 50s, a lot of them would probably say the same thing. But in a sense, that doesn't matter. What matters is what younger generations now would make of it. Would they be prepared to serve? Because if you've got sort of, and I remember doing a phone-in a couple of years ago, I think after the Ukraine war started, and I asked the question, would you be prepared to fight for your country? And the consensus was, no, I'm not fighting for NATO, I'm not fighting to save Estonia, but if Russia was going to invade our country, yes, of course I would. I think that's an accurate summation of what people said. But do you think there is any case for introducing some sort of national service scheme in this country? 0345 6060 973. But let's talk to a couple of guests. One, I think, is going to say yes, and another no. Dr. Elizabeth Broad, Senior Fellow with the Atlantic Council's Transatlantic Security Initiative, who wrote about why Britain should introduce national service. Good evening to you. What are the arguments in favour, apart from the threat that we now face from Russia?
The arguments in send their sons and daughters over generations, and the rest of society has very little connection to the armed forces and in international security. But it's not just about that. And the fact that we need a wider segment of the population to in the armed forces, and these are good careers, but you have to encounter the armed forces somehow. How is that going to happen? Well, one way in which it can happen in a very useful way is through military service, and the way Norway does it is I have long believed that the best possible way, which is they assess everybody, they select the around 15% top performing men and women, they get to do military service. It is a fantastic entry on their CVs, and the armed forces get exactly the kind of people they need. And of those who are selected for military service and perform it, a quarter of those men and women stay on in the armed forces as professional soldiers. But it's not even just about the armed forces. And I think while we're having this conversation, we should talk about other segments of society, other essential services that need to surge in a crisis. The NHS, the provision of electricity, water and so forth, public transport, all of that needs to surge in serious crises. So we should do a similar scheme, selecting the ablest young men and women for specialist training in those areas as well. And that way everybody, there's no reason that people couldn't serve. And it's an incredible entry on these people's CVs, far better than university, because it shows that you have been assessed along with everybody else in your year group, and you have been deemed to be one of the top performers.
Do you think, though, that British 17, 18, 19-year-olds would be up for doing this? Because it has to be done by consent. I mean, conscription always sounds as if it is forced. National service is slightly different from conscription. But do you think that our young people are psychologically attuned to this?
Well, I think if you presented them with essentially a competition, as it were, just like applying to anything else, and you said you get to compete against everybody else, and if we deem you to be one of the ablest and best performing in your year group, you will get this training that only the people we consider to be the ablest and the best performing in the year group get. So it's like being admitted to one of the top universities in the country, or being admitted to, I don't know, Britain Got Talent. You compete, and if you gain admission, as it were, you're incredibly pleased, and you don't say, well, actually, I don't want to do it because I have come up with a reason in my head why I don't want to do it. You're incredibly pleased that you are deemed one of the best, and so you will do it.
Several times you've mentioned this phrase, the brightest and ablest, or words to that effect. A lot of people think, well, isn't it people who maybe aren't in employment, educational training who would be ideal for this, rather than sort of people who are, I don't know how else to describe it, sort of at the top of the spectrum?
Well, if you want to find something for people who are unemployed to do, then I don't think military service is that, because military service and national service in any other crucial function of society is not about giving some people something to do. It's about fulfilling the need that we have to keep those services going during a crisis, and to keep the country safe. But you can be 17 years old, 18 years old, and look at the job prospects for young people today and say it's hopeless. How am I going to compete against all these other people who have been to a good university and so forth? And then imagine you got an invitation to this assessment test, and it's only in the Norwegian model. It's only aptitude. Doesn't look at what school you attended, and then you have the chance to outcompete
kiti bana. Gari inaguruma tunasioni kienda. Ndo pambana na mwindi tutadu. Nilikuwa nimedrive nikafika wapi kweli? Nimenirudisha huku. whatever. Radio yangu itaki kuongea. Nilijua ile saa ilinitoa.
An exercise in Wales, chance to see the world,
but fighting for France.
Yeah, well, I suppose randomly. I mean, I served in the mid '90s to early 2000s. In the '80s, the Legion was about 50% English. Randomly,
really.
So yes, in the '80s it was a very, very heavy English. At the minute, lots of Nepalese and Brazilians. But yeah, there's always been quite a strong English and Southern Irish element in the Foreign Legion.
And does it pay better than the regular British Army?
No, when I joined it was £150 a month.
No.
Yeah, and that was in 1995.
So why would you do it?
€700.
I mean,
for the adventure.
I can think of lots of ways to have an adventure without doing that for very little money.
I think you're contained. You don't need to spend much when you're in there because you obviously can't go out much. You haven't got much to spend it on, and life's very restricted. But I think now it's about €700 to €900 a month. But generally, the adventure, and they've never been short of recruits. I think still around 1 in 6 gets accepted.
So let's go back to the subject of some form of national service or conscription. Do you think that would be a good idea?
In the last graph situation, like to throw in numbers, you end up with units and regiments that can't do much, they can't go anywhere, they have very little value, unless you're looking at like what the Swiss have, which is where you can then recall them up again when you have a major need to mobilise a mass of people. But in terms of what they provide whilst they're serving, it's of very little value, because you're going to have to then take away your core of NCOs and officers to spread amongst those units that are comprised of conscripts to build them up and actually have some form of coherent, effective force.
Could you not argue, though, that if I mean, say we had a scheme like this and it ran for 10 years and you had, say, 10,000 people each year going through it, at least then after the 10 years you've got 100,000 people of fighting age that if there was a war, at least they've got some background in the military rather than essentially picking people off the street and trying to train them up in a few weeks.
I mean, it's true, but you probably only end up with 30% of those actually being of any use, even during that time in service. If you look at the French one, the 12-month model, or 10 months they're going to serve, they actually have learned very little by the time they come to the end of those 10 months. And that was the problem they had with the French Army. The time of getting them into it, teaching them and training them, they were then at the point of leaving, but before they could actually learn any useful skills, you'd only have people with a very bare minimum of skills. I mean, you look at it and say, if you really wanted to augment the strength of the British Army, you just create a British Foreign Legion.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because my podcast partner on Where Politics Meets History, Tessa Dunlop, we did an episode last week where she was saying, well, look, if we weren't to allow migrants to work in this country when they come over the channel and all the rest of it, why don't we have a British Foreign Legion where they can go and serve in that, which I thought was quite a strange idea for somebody who's on the left of politics. But, I mean, why is it that we don't have a British Foreign Legion?
I don't know, because we've got numbers of Commonwealth citizens who obviously got people who've got settled status who join. Going back in history, we had a German regiment in the 18th century. We've always had, various units comprised of some form of foreigners. And you look around the world, there's still a Spanish Legion that makes recruits and Latin Americans now. There's always been was use of foreigners and people who wanted to join. So you'd look at it and say, we've got the Brigade of Goethals and whatnot. Would it be a stretch to turn around and say, you get it, you use the French experience, you were then able to train a large volume of people, for a minimum of 5 years and retain them after that as well, and have an organisation to that and pay what the French did. You pay less than you pay your regular French citizens and whatnot, so you'd say that's an option, but of course the problem with that is you've got to look to fund it and to have the equipment and the material to use for that, which at the minute, if you look at going to a conscription model, that's where you're pulling out your own equipment to reserve and just having a bare bones almost agile style of unit, and that's the problem. You get very little in return for it.
Chris, what an interesting call. Thank you very much indeed. Hugh says, we can call up 200,000 veterans, all trained, who remain in the live list for 10 years. Well, that's a very fair point to make. So the question is, should we follow France and various other European countries who have reintroduced some form of national service? It's not compulsory, it is voluntary. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that we should have any sort of form of compulsory national service. But what would it actually achieve, apart from making politicians look good? And would it make the country actually safer? Would it cost so much money that it just wouldn't be worth the money? Or do you think, no, we really have to look at things like this, given the threat that we have from Russia at the moment? It's 9:30 on NBC. Let's get the latest news headlines with Daniel Jackson.
Ministers have scrapped a manifesto promise to allow workers to claim immediately for unfair dismissal. The protection will now be available after 6 months, down from the current 2 years. Proposals in the Employment Rights Bill for sick pay and paternity leave from day one remain unchanged. At least 83 people are now known to have died in huge tower block fires in Hong Kong. Hundreds remain unaccounted for after the flames broke out yesterday afternoon. And the Prime Minister's insisted Labour has kept its manifesto promise not to raise taxes on working people. Sakir Starmer's told LBC fairness was at the heart of the budget statement. LBC weather: cloud and rain will clear southeast tonight, leaving many places dry but breezy with clear spells. Heavy showers will spread across northern and western areas overnight, lows of 7 degrees.
This is LBC.
I'm fulfilling more international orders thanks to working capital support.
Export insurance protects my business against the risk of not getting paid by an overseas buyer.
At UK Export Finance, we help businesses export with confidence. Between 2024 and 2025, we provided over £14 billion of government-backed finance and insurance to help businesses grow overseas. Search UK Export Finance to find out how we could help you win export contracts, fulfil orders, and get paid.
The big toy event is in store now at Lidl, with over 100 toys for every age. Go classic with our famous wooden toys, or get your hands on Bluey, Barbie, and more, like Hot Wheels for just $1.49. Lidl, more to value. Limited offer subject to availability. Select stores, GB only.
For people living with dementia, Christmas can be confusing, overwhelming, heartbreaking. Families are often left to cope alone. But you can help a family reimagine Christmas. Donate to Alzheimer's Society and you can help provide practical support, expert advice and crucial companionship this Christmas. It will take a society to beat dementia, and we can't do it without you. Search Alzheimer's Society and donate today.
Ian Dale, call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
So we're talking about national service conscription. France is reintroducing a limited form of military service, and I'm just asking the question, is that something that we as a country should look at too, without offering any opinion whatsoever? Let's go to Francisco, who's in Nottingham. Hi. Are you there? No, he's not there. Let's go to Sam. No, he's not there either. Okay, no, we can go to Sam. It's chaos here at LBC. Let's go to Sam in Great Dunlow. Hi, Sam. No, he's gone again. What's happening here? He's gone again. Right, let's take a text. That's probably safer at the moment. Vince, who says he's ex-military in Cambridge, says, why not do non-combatant conscription for 18 to 20-year-olds unless they're in university or painful, I think you mean gainful employment, allowing them to take, maybe it was painful, allowing them to take full use of benefits once served if needed, but reduce their ability to claim if they have not. Right, shall we try again? Let's go to Francisco in Nottingham. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Oh, hello. Such a relief. Right, what would you like to tell me, Francisco?
I have to say, it's actually quite good idea. I come from Brazil. We had national service there. You have to go there when you're 18. And I did. Was a really great time of my life. You learn valuable skills. I had to sort of disagree with the last caller. He said, you can't learn anything in 12 months. You can. There's, besides the army skills you got, like, you learn how to shoot, you learn how to, you got yourself discipline and stuff. You also learn all the skills that you can actually use after you left. You learn how to work in groups. You build your confidence. You learn how to be resilient because, you get to fail and try over and over again. So I think it's a great idea. I think kids nowadays, they probably could use that a little bit more. Both of my kids, they go to cadets. I can see how much they change over time, and it could help the country as a whole because we can teach our kids some really valuable skills.
Do you think, though, that the average British 18-year-old would see this as a positive thing?
Probably initially not, but I think once they start to join or go there and see how it works, I think over time they will. To be fair, when I did mine, we had more people asking to stay than asking to not to stay.
That's interesting, isn't it? So it wasn't all sort of military manoeuvres. It was about, basically learning to be an adult, I guess, to an extent.
It is. I mean, it's Brazil. We don't have wars, but you sort of learn. We had peacekeeping. When I was serving, I actually went to a battalion that was deployable to peacekeeping, and it is. I mean, you learn a lot of skills. You can, if you want to be. I think it's sort of a time that you can test yourself, because we had people like, if you want to be a doctor, you can serve with the infirmary. If you want to be a accountant or anything, you can work within the office side of it. If you want to be an engineer, you can work in mechanics. So it does test what you really want, because I always say we push our kids to decide what they want to be so soon. And I think that will give them the flavor of, like, you want to be an engineer, try that. And at the same time, you learn the other skills. Oh, actually, I like it. Good. You can keep it. Some of my best friends was from that time. Some of them became officials, some of them became police officers, some became lawyers.
Well, I think your comments echo those of several relations of mine, mainly uncles, who did do national service in the predominantly 1950s, I suppose. I mean, my father was at that age. He didn't, because he was worked on a farm, so if you worked on that, you didn't have to do national service, but several other relations of mine did. And they all said very similar things to you, that they thought it was two of the best years, 2 or 3 best years of their life. They learned so much, they made lifelong friends, and became men. I mean, it sounds a trying thing to say, but I remember those conversations. Francesco, thank you. Sam, I hope, is in Great Dunmow. Hello, Sam.
Hello there, how are you?
Hi, good, thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, I'd just like to tell you what Wilfred Owen said. I'd start there, actually, and say, to remind you how he caught them in the lie. He said you would not tell some people the lie. Perpetrate orient the core remains. There is no glory to be had in dying for king and country. We've seen the way our soldiers have been treated after the recent wars that we've gone through. We've seen and they're going to actually have any real influence is absolute nonsense. Modern warfare, the recent conflict between Pakistan and India and Israel and Iran has shown that it's cyber warfare now, it's drones, it's autonomous systems, it's signals intelligence, it's advanced logistics, AI. These are the things that are winning wars now. It's not cannon fodder.
Well, you're partly right and you're partly wrong, because if you look at the war in Ukraine, yes, a lot of that has been done by drones, but there are still infantry. The Russians, goodness knows what the death count on both sides is in that war at the moment, but it's in the hundreds of thousands.
And how have we treated our infantry? Sorry to interject. How have we treated our infantry and the soldiers when they come back and serve their countries? What examples have we set to you?
Not well enough. We can agree on that.
Had come back from American troops, etc., from the Second World War. Those we've actually given them to people for asylum. We're not using the infrastructure. We don't respect the infrastructure we have. We don't respect the personnel we have. So why would we put our youngsters into that sort of system?
We're not talking about compulsory conscription here. We're talking about a form of national service, which does not mean that 18, 19-year-olds will be sent into battle. But what it means is that if we were to have a war, say in 10 years' time, presumably it would be with Russia, then the argument goes you have people that at least have some sort of training, rather than people being forcibly conscripted without any training whatsoever.
But if we can anticipate a war with Russia in 10 years, shouldn't we be working to avoid and alleviate the reasons for that war, rather than preparing people?
Well, yes.
Before Russian guns, and we would not respect them for it. I mean,
we'd like the land to be filled with milk and honey as well.
People urinate on the cenotaph. This is what we already see. But why should we put our youngsters into this turn where their sacrifice is not going to be honoured? People, we had David Levy not even bothered to remember to wear a poppy. Why should anybody go ahead and we don't even have a single national identity. We're too busy fighting each other. I want to fight you because you're white, you're brown, you're black. I want to fight you because you're a Muslim, you're an immigrant, you're a Hindu, you're whatever you are. We're too busy fighting along ideological. We're not even unified as a nation, so what would we be fighting for?
Well, I think if there was an imminent threat of an invasion of this country, I think we all know what we would be fighting for, don't we?
I think Russia's an old ally. I mean, Stalin was our ally against Hitler.
Yeah, well, Putin clearly isn't.
Putin isn't, but ultimately, I mean, we only have Florence Nightingale because of what happened and what Putin is trying to put right today. And our major ally is Donald Trump, who is aligned with Putin. So what do we do here? Where are we? We're in a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean to say we don't need defence forces.
Of course we do, but we should respect the defence forces so that we don't need to ask conscription.
I completely
voluntarily want to do.
I completely agree with you, but you're arguing for an idealistic world which doesn't exist. All I'm saying is that, and as I say, I'm not arguing for this, but I do think that we need to have a really big national debate about the future of our armed forces, and I think this is something that needs to be part of that debate. Sam, thank you. Let's move on to Tom, who's in Chippenham. Hello, Tom.
Yes, good evening, Ian. By the way, national service was compulsory, so it was descriptive in the 1950s.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so what I wanted to say, I served in the Royal Engineers in Germany, and we were watching the Russians, and if they did a move that we didn't like, we would blow up the bridges to stop them getting further. So you do learn lots of things in the military. I got my driving license there, for instance. I also did, of course, as a vehicle mechanic, as a radio operator, and I think boys today, I suppose you have to have girls as well, but they would all benefit from the 2 years.
Yeah, I absolutely. Because, I mean, what we've got to remember is the armed forces is not just about people fighting on the front line. You've got all the logistics people as well, who are equal. I mean, you cannot fight a war without proper logistics, as Vladimir Putin found out to his cost at the beginning of the Ukraine war. There are all sorts of people who are in the background who never get the recognition that they deserve, and does the infantry do it too.
Yes, well, I'm classed now, at the age of 92, I'm classed as a veteran because I did national service.
Yeah,
That's quite something.
Well, it's quite right too.
Quite an award. Yes.
Tom, I hate to tell you this, but you're not going to be the oldest person that we're going to talk to in this hour, because we have my very good friend Constance from Woking on the line after the break, and she will have a tale to tell, because she always does. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Keep your calls coming at 0345 6060 973. It's 9:45.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Immigration plummets with fewer people coming here to work and more young people leaving. Is that really a cause for celebration? Plus, why Donald Trump's top negotiator has been branded a traitor.
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or our new LBC app.
With over 50 years' experience, at Fidelity, we believe there's a difference between investing and being invested. Investing is having access to guidance, tools, and expert insights. Being invested means feeling confident about your future. Investing is choosing from a wealth of investment options. Being invested means focusing on your long-term goals. For ISAs, pensions, or advice, be truly invested with Fidelity. Go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
For people living with dementia, Christmas can be confusing, overwhelming, heartbreaking. Families are often left to cope alone. But you can help a family reimagine Christmas. Donate to Alzheimer's Society and you can help provide practical support, expert advice and crucial companionship this Christmas. It will take a society to beat dementia, and we can't do it without you. Search Alzheimer's Society and donate today.
Think about cheese. Make your thoughts cheesier. Now add 100% chicken breast filling, chipotle sauce and a mega cheese melt, and it's giving the new cheesy chicken stack at McDonald's. Did we mention it's cheesy?
Cheese.
Available until the 4th of Jan 2026 from 11 a.m. Price of participation may vary, subject to availability.
When you're cozied up on the sofa, when the drama's got you totally hooked, when you're completely engrossed in what's about to happen. Hey, did you eat all these?
Oh, sorry, didn't notice.
Go on, there's more in the kitchen.
Nothing brings us together like great TV. And a TV licence covers you to watch all TV channels, so you can make the most of those long dark nights. Search TV licence together.
This is LBC with Ian Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
9:47 on LBC. I'm off to Cardiff on Sunday. I'm going to see Cliff Richard in concert in Cardiff, and everyone through the glass window is looking rather sceptical about this use of my free time, but he's an absolute legend. And of course, when he first came on the scene in 1958, there was national service, but I don't think Cliff Richard did national service. I shall ask him after the concert. Right, let's go to Patrick in Gwent. Hello, Patrick.
Hi, Ian, all right?
Hello. What would you like to say?
Long time since I spoke to you, right? I just wanted to quickly tell you this. Right, my son now, he's in his 30s now, but when he was 16, okay, all his life, all he wanted to do was join the army, okay? Hello? You still there?
Oh, of course I am.
Right. All right, sorry. Okay, right, so bear with me now, right? So I've had a couple of strokes and stuff, right? So I sort of go back and forth, right? Anyway, I'll just quickly tell you this. Right, when he joined the army, right, he was 16, he went in as a junior soldier, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, and it was for the Royal Welsh. And for the first 6 weeks, now, we didn't know this back home, but for the first 6 weeks, he wasn't allowed chocolate, pop, he wasn't allowed to contact his family back home, and blah, 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 and all the rest of it, okay? But then, you know, after the 6 weeks, when they pass out from being they go from being like a soldier, and then they get they turn to the regiment, okay? So they get their bearing change, okay? So we went to that event, and I swear to God, he was never the same boy after them 6 weeks. And then when he came home and he told us what they actually done to him, my God, how anybody would want to volunteer for that, I'll never know, right? For instance, okay, quick, just bear with me. You make your bed. It's got to be folded to a certain thing. Then the next thing, the sergeants go up the stairs, they throw it through the window, pick it run down the stairs, pick it back up, bring it up the stairs, and up and down, and then a friend of mine once said to me,
else, I have to say. But I think that's part of it. I'm not sure teaching someone how to make a bed in a certain way is treating someone like a dog.
No. All I'm saying is, when you make the bed, then you iron all your clothes and you chuck it all through the window, and you run down the stairs, pick it up, and do it all again. Yeah. Then again and again and again and again.
Well, you'd like to think that sort of thing wouldn't happen nowadays.
But it did then, and this is only back 20 years ago. You know, we're not going back in the 50s. So can I just, do you mind if I just ask you, when did national service was abolished?
1960.
1960. So, you know, in the 70s then, you know, the troops that were in Ireland, were they voluntarily, or were they because the government sent them?
Well, the government sent them, but they were there voluntarily, if you see what I mean. I mean, they weren't conscripted.
Oh, it's okay, sorry. I thought they might have been. Okay, that's a different story.
Okay, Patrick, I'm gonna leave it there because I'm going to fit in at least two more callers before we reach the end of the hour. Anyone remember that sitcom, Get Some In, from the late 1970s? It was all about national service in the 1950s. Very, very funny. Right, I'm delighted to announce that Constance in Woking is on the line. One of my favourite callers. Constance, how are you doing?
Well, I'm still here. I don't know whether I am. Anyway, forgive my voice. I've got a sore throat.
You sound absolutely fine.
I just wanted to say, I think you knew already that my husband and I were both served in the last war, and I thought that the youngsters got discipline. That was the main thing. Well, not the main thing, but the young people that went into the service there, they were taught discipline, which is lacking a lot, I think, in this country now, with the young people. But, and also, I have a son-in-law who did national service, and he learned how to be a dentist when he was doing national service.
How strange.
Well, they taught them all sorts of different trades. A lot of people today are quite wealthy because they went into national service. However, the young people in the war, the 15-year-old, 16-year-old boys rushed to join the service and serve their country. And a lot of them got through to the Navy because the Navy accepted young seamen. I know that because I went out with one. And that's another story. Anyway, Ian, that's all I wanted to say. And they also get so much out of the comradeship.
When did you serve, Constance?
Oh, I can't remember that. I went in when I was 17 into the WAF. Or you can work that out. I'm 101 now.
My maths isn't good enough for that, but it would have been, what, the 1940s?
Yes, that would be round about that, I think.
Now, Constance, what are you doing for Christmas?
I'm staying in bed on my own, which I've done for 12 years now. My husband died in 1998, and since then I've been on my own. Apart from my dog, but I've lost my dog now. Anyway, I'm quite happy.
The reason I ask is because I'm going to be on LBC on Christmas Day between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m, and it would make my day to speak to you on Christmas Day.
Well, it would make mine too, Ian. It really would. Something to look forward to. Thank you so much. I won't take up any more of your time.
Constance, thanks so much for calling in. I've been talking to Constance on and off on the radio for the past couple of years, and she's an absolute delight. And Sam on a text says, I could listen to Constance for hours. I really could. Lovely lady. Well, tune in on Christmas Day, and I'll be talking to Constance. One way or the other, we're going to sort that out. Right, let's go to Mo, who's a new caller in Shoreditch. Hello, Mo.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I just want to, obviously, I've got a few points to point out. I think my point would be the military service today isn't built for the war that we actually live in. You've got obviously 18-year-olds being pushed into a model that was obviously built decades ago. And then when you look at the sort of modern conflict, it's obviously shifted to cyber, data, drones, and information warfare. When you look at the gap is obviously obvious. And if you've lived, if you've lived it or studied it or anything close to the defense or tech or national security, you would know. I think when you look at the training, it's out of sync. For example, if you were to train individuals on cyber and AI for military purposes, most of the university courses feeding into defense roles are outdated, and that's a fact really, because there's students out there that say that when I go to study a master's in AI, it's literally jargon that's been fed in from a year or two ago. Another point, a really important point for me, is support for the personnel is a bit weak. You send young people into high-pressure situations, either physical or digital, whatever you want to call it, with minimal aftercare. I think most charities, and obviously I've looked into this, most charities are not even at full capacity and they're struggling to look after veterans, So there's no proper pathways into, support for mental health and transitional support as well, to the skilled roles that you pick up in the military. When you do finish the military, you're able, not everyone is able to sort of move on from that. War isn't boots on the ground, and obviously we've seen that with Ukraine and Russia.
Well, it is partly, and we have seen with Ukraine and Russia that certainly boots on the ground and sort of infantry fighting, that is still a part of modern warfare.
Of course, but the majority of it now, we've obviously learned from Ukraine and Russia that, having boots on the ground is basically near enough pointless, because, you could be just sitting there and the drone comes left, right and centre and, that's it, you're blown up.
Well, yes, and obviously technology has a huge role in the modern military, and I suspect you're right that the technology is sort of is way ahead of the military in terms of how they can deploy it, and I suspect in the future the successful militaries are the ones that will be able to deploy AI and other forms of technology in a way that's better than their competitors.
Of course, definitely, I totally agree with you, and I think the average 18-year-old now isn't the same as the 20-year-old. The average 18-year-old now is not the same as the 18-year-old 20 years ago. And that's obviously something you need to take into consideration. Most young people now are shaped by social media, constant comparison, quick dopamine hits, an unstable job market. So that also needs to be taken into consideration. I mean, you need to also look at their resilience, their attention, their expectation of, many 18-year-olds have different expectations. They're not all the same. You can't throw them into an old school system.
That is very true, Mo, and thank you very much indeed for your call. Well, that's me done for another day. Thank you for all of your messages this evening. I will be back on Monday at 7. I think at least I will be back on Monday at 7. Sorry, Ben Cage is just putting me off gesticulating as he does. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free global player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. Put your news categories in the order you want, pause and rewind live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Clive Bull, but right now, he's stopped gesticulating.
You should see Ian, you should see me on a football pitch. You think that's gesticulating?
I really wouldn't wish that on anyone. It's Ben Kentish.
Thank you very much indeed. Hello there, and a very, very good evening to you this Thursday night. Ben Kentish here with you on LBC at 10 o'clock.
There's no way in a million years I would move here now. And I don't know any business people who are moving here now.
Net migration to the UK plummets, down almost 2/3 in the last year alone. Good news, reckon most of our politicians. But dig below the headlines and it's a bit more of a mixed picture, because the fall is being driven by a big drop in the number of people coming here to work and study. And the other big change is the jump in the number of young people leaving this country to give life a go somewhere else instead. So tell me, are you pleased to see immigration falling? Or are these figures just a sign that people don't want to come here anymore and the young people already here will want to leave?
On your radio, on the LBC app. And
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 10 o'clock, the government U-turned on plans to allow sacked workers to claim unfair dismissal from their first day in a job. Ministers will amend the Employment Rights Bill so protections will start after 6 months. It's currently 2 years. LBC's political correspondent Aggie Chambray has more.
Reaction so far. Business, pretty happy about this. Unions, I would say, is a mixed reaction. What is interesting is we're starting to get reaction from Labour MPs on the left of the party. I think this is interesting from Andy MacDonald, who's, as you know, a long-standing Labour MP, who said the plans announced today to merely reduce the qualifying period for unfair dismissal is a complete betrayal. We cannot support that measure.
The Prime Minister says he's asking everybody to contribute more as he denied breaking a manifesto promise not to raise taxes on working people. Sir Keir Starmer insists higher contributions, including from an extra 3-year freeze on income tax thresholds, will be kept to a minimum. He told LBC the budget had fairness at heart. And Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy told LBC she agrees.
I think this is the fairest way of delivering on the promise that we made to rebuild our public services, to improve people's living standards and to secure an economy that is stable after a period of huge instability that left working people paying the price.
Well, the budget included a commitment to end the two-child benefit cap at a cost of between £2 and £3 billion a year. At least 83 people have been killed after a huge fire in high-rise apartment buildings in Hong Kong. Hundreds are still unaccounted for this evening. Police say the fire may have spread fast due to unsafe bamboo scaffolding and protective mesh sheets installed by a construction company. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. An inquest jury has concluded a 12-year-old girl who took her own life at a children's psychiatric unit in Sheffield last January was failed multiple times. Mia Lucas had an undiagnosed neurological disorder. Both trusts who cared for her have apologised. And Russia's president says a US-brokered Ukraine peace plan could be a basis for future agreements, but claims there are no final versions. Vladimir Putin claims his country is ready for serious talks. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 2 points at 96.94. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.14. LBC weather, a blustery day tomorrow with sunshine and showers, more prolonged rain in the northwest, a high of 12 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ben Kentish.
3 minutes after 10 is the time. Hello there. A very good evening to you indeed. Ben Kentish here on LBC with you through until 1 o'clock. Great to have you company this Thursday night on the programme.
When President Putin issued his order, they were shot down by Russian forces. So I tend to believe that President Putin is operating in good faith.
Donald Trump's top negotiator, the man who has been leading discussions with Putin on the war in Ukraine, dubbed an American traitor today after a leaked phone call reveals him giving priceless advice and information about how to handle Donald Trump to one of Putin's top advisors. Bring the details later this hour. Plus,
we apologise to the Chancellor and members of Parliament for this technical error and have initiated an investigation into how this happened.
The fallout from the Office of Budget Responsibility being, let's be honest, about as irresponsible with the budget as it's possible to be continues after, of course, it published the entire thing before the Chancellor had actually delivered it. As one poor member of the OBR's IT team presumably wonders how his day yesterday or hers could have gone any worse, from 12, what's the worst day you've ever had at work?
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. This is LBC.
Well, we start tonight with what, on the face of it, looks like a rare, at the moment, good news story for the government. Confirmation from official statistics today that after several record highs, net migration into and out of this country has plummeted. Once you subtract the number of people leaving from the number of people coming here, you get a net migration figure of just 204,000 people in the last 12 months. And if that sounds like a lot to you, if you think, my goodness, that's a little higher than the tens of thousands that we were promised a few years ago, you'd be right. But it's a darn sight less than the 649,000 people who made up those net migration figures 12 months ago. And the fact that there has been this drop of 2/3 has been welcomed by politicians across the spectrum. Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, calling it a step in the right direction. And I think on the face of it, at least, a lot of us we would agree with that. Most people, me included for sure, think that immigration to this country has been far too high for far too long, and we need to get those figures down. But you dig below those statistics, and it's maybe not the wonderful success story that it might appear to be, because behind those stats, behind those headline figures, there's two big things going on. The first is a major drop in the number of people coming here to work and study. Gone are the days, it seems, where Europeans wanted to come to Britain to get on, to work hard, to start a business. In the last year, 70,000 more EU citizens left the UK than actually arrived. Increasingly, the number of people coming here as asylum seekers is going up. That makes up a greater proportion of the people coming here. The number of people coming here to work has gone down. Fewer visas issued to workers. And so too for the number of people coming here to study. Fewer international students coming to help fund our universities, to help subsidise the fees of British students, which, let's be honest, is what they do. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, even more troubling and really quite sobering. It really should be a wake-up call for our leaders, for all of us, I think, because the second trend behind these figures is another massive exodus from this country of young people. In the last year alone, 185,000 young people aged 16 to 34 left this country. In fact, of all the people that left in the last year, 3/4 of them were under the age of 34. Young people don't want to grow up, or at least start a career, get on in Britain anymore. 185,000 of them reckon that they can get a better life and better opportunities abroad. They're growing up here, they're having a look around when they get to working age, and they're thinking, do you know what, I'm all right, thank you. I think I'll give it a go somewhere else. And I just wonder whether that sort of casts a different light on these statistics. Tell me, are you glad, regardless, that net migration is down? Is it a good thing? Not as many people are coming. If some people are leaving, fine, it frees up resources for the rest of us already. Is that your view? Get the figures down, don't care what's driving. 03456060973 is the number to call. Or is it actually a sign, these figures, that Britain is in decline? People don't want to come here anymore. They might have done a few years ago, but now they fancy Canada or Australia or France or Dubai much more than they fancy rainy little Britain. Is it really good that so many young people are leaving these shores because they think they can get a better life elsewhere? 03456060973. So tell me whether you're just glad that immigration's coming down, full stop, or whether it bothers you and worries you that people don't want to come to work here anymore. And the young people that we do have, they want to go and work somewhere else instead. Why do you think that is? Why don't people want to come to Britain in the way they used to? Why do so many young people want to get out as quickly as they can? 0345 6060973. Because you can celebrate the fact that migration's down. Great. Fine. Keir Starmer says it's a step in the right direction. It's not a step in the right direction, Prime Minister, is it? If a large part of the reason is because so many young people don't want to grow up here. That's not a step in the right direction. I'd say that's a step backwards, if anything. Why do you think that is? Why do people not want to come anymore? Or why do young people want to leave? Keep your calls coming in on that. Let's talk about it all with Emma Sinclair, MBE, a businesswoman, entrepreneur, chief executive of the software company Enterprise Alumni. Emma, very good evening to you. What's your reaction to these figures? Because, as I said, the political class seems to say, great, brilliant, the figures are coming down, hallelujah. But as I say, you dig a bit deeper and it's not quite as rosy a picture.
Hi, Ben. I mean, less people are coming to work, less tax, less people are coming to start a business, less jobs, less people want to stay. And, you know, I've been doing a lot of talking over the last few days and weeks, Ben, about the budget and about wealthy people leaving the country. And you rightly said it.